Let these souls withdrawn from their vessels, manifestations of disparity, elucidated by fire, burrow deep within me, retreating to a darkness beyond the reach of flame.
Hello friends, and welcome to episode 7 of the Bonfire. In this episode, I'll be discussing the lore and theory surrounding the firekeeper that aids us throughout Dark Souls 3. Up until this point, I hadn't really paid her much mind, but there really is a lot in the way of lore and speculation surrounding her. So without further ado, let's get into it. Throughout the Souls trilogy, the concept of a firekeeper being there to aid the player is not a new one. In Dark Souls 1, we have Anastasia of Astora, Quelaag's sister, the Fair Lady, and the Dark Moon Nidus. In Dark Souls 2, we have sisters Strowan, Moral, and Gryant, and in Dark Souls 3, we have just one main firekeeper who's never given a name. But what exactly makes her different from the firekeepers within the previous games? Throughout all 3 games, the firekeeper's purpose remains the same: tending to the fire and aiding those who wish to preserve it. But in Dark Souls 3, our relationship with the firekeeper feels different, more intimate in a way. She not only tends to the fire, but also grants us levels. She's always at our service, always waiting for us at Firelink Shrine. Upon our first encounter with her, she says,
"Welcome to the bonfire, unkindled one. I am a firekeeper. I tend to the flame, and tend to thee. The lords have left their thrones, and must be delivered to them. To this end I am at thy side."
And she seems blindly faithful to her duty, as even if we make the decision to kill her, upon her resurrection, she says,
"I'm truly sorry, but knowest thou not, I cannot die. So please, Ashen One, allow me to serve thee."
But her story still seems pretty simple thus far. Her duty, as the name implies, is to tend to the fire, making sure it stays kindled. This should be her main purpose in life, but this is where she differs from the other firekeepers, as tending to the fire isn't her main desire. You are. When conversing with her, she'll often reiterate that she's by your side, but it's always with the caveat that it's to a specific end, that being the renewal of an age of fire. And if this is the path that you end up choosing, you probably won't notice anything off about her, as she'll end up doing exactly what she told you she would. However, if you begin to stray from this path, you'll likely start to notice some inconsistencies in her character. For example, if you give her the firekeeper's eyes, she'll tell you that through them, she's seen you betraying your duty in pursuit of an age of darkness. She will bluntly ask you if this is actually what you mean to do, and if you tell her that it is, she responds in a rather unexpected way.
"Of course. I serve thee, and will do as thou bidst. This will be our private affair. No one else may know of this. Stay thy path. Find lords to link the fire, and I will blindly tend to the flame until the day of thy grand betrayal."
Again, tending to the fire and prolonging Gwyn's age should be her only goal, as this is literally the reason that the Order of Firekeepers was created. So why is she so quick to accept your choice, and even agree to aid you in it by turning a blind eye and continuing to serve you? She doesn't even ask you why you would want to let the fire fade, and it's almost as though she already knows. Let's take a look at the history of firekeepers, as it's clear that they've undergone some changes throughout the games. There has been some debate over how exactly they came to exist in the world, whether they were women who chose to become firekeepers to tend to the flame, or if they were literally created by the flame to preserve it. I'm of the opinion that it's the former, and that these are women who have, in some cases, chosen, and in others, been forced to join the order. My biggest piece of evidence for this is Irina of Karim, the young woman that we have the opportunity to rescue. Irina is on a journey to become a firekeeper, and if you save her and play out the good ending of her story, she achieves this goal. She's able to serve you in the same ways as the original firekeeper, and the only thing that she's really missing is a bonfire of her own to tend to. But if this is the case, It points to there having been someone in the early days of the Age of Fire that designated this role and created the first of its ranks. I feel like the most likely person to have done this would be Gwyn himself, as he must have realized that there would be ages following his death where he could no longer dictate the treatment of his flame. But because we never get to see his Age of Fire in its prime before he sacrificed himself, we can only really speculate on what this initial order would have looked like. Likely, it would have been made up of women that revered him so much that they were willing to dedicate their lives to his cause, and so they learned the ways of the fire, teaching themselves how to tend to the flames and harness the power of their humanity. They knew that after Gwyn's death and their own, these teachings would be instrumental in preserving this age. But at some point before Gwyn's demise, there seems to have been some kind of issue with his firekeepers, an issue that would lead him to remove their eyes and forbid them from having the gift of sight. But what exactly could these women have seen within Gwyn's fire that made him fearful enough to blind them? I believe that the answer to this can be surmised by taking a look at the aforementioned item, Eyes of a Firekeeper, whose description reads, "A pair of dark eyes, said to be the eyes of the first firekeeper, and the light that was lost by all firekeepers to come. It reveals to the sightless firekeepers things that they should never see." And upon giving them to our firekeeper, she responds,
Ashen One, forgive me if this soundeth strange. The eyes show a world without fire, a vast stretch of darkness. But 'tis different to what is seen when stripped of vision. In the far distance, I sense the presence of tiny flames, like precious embers, left to us by past lords, linkers of the fire. Could this be what draws me to this strangely enticing darkness?
Through these eyes, she sees a world of darkness, and yet within this darkness, fire still exists. This is the same thing that the first firekeepers saw, and the reason that Gwyn had to blind them. If Gwyn's fire can persist no matter what, even in the darkness, then there's really no reason for fighting, for the endless cycle of death. Gwyn's reason for fighting was keeping the fire alive, but if the people should find out that it would stay alive regardless, then what reason would they have to blindly follow him? And we see his fear becoming a reality if we decide to refuse linking the flame. Our firekeeper doesn't try to stop us. She doesn't even question us. She even offers to help us on this path. What difference does it make what she does or what we do if there's still going to be fire no matter what? Gwyn led his followers to believe that his flame was delicate enough that they should die in order to protect it, when in reality, the force that he had created had irreparably changed the world and could never truly be destroyed. But what good would it have done him to be honest about that? Who would want to lay down their life for something that would just go on existing regardless? Our firekeeper no longer cares about her duty to the flame, only to us. Perhaps it's because we gave her the eyes, for the first time in her life allowing her to actually see the thing that she's been sacrificing herself for. But this theory does beg the question of why all firekeepers in the game aren't blind, as it seems that this would be Gwyn's desire. And I think that this discrepancy comes down to tradition changing over time and integrating into cultures that are already established. Obviously, the firekeepers did continue to pass down the tradition following Gwyn's death, otherwise we wouldn't see any, at least in the latter two games. The first women to study the flame likely got closer to it than any that would follow, and fearing that those who would take up the mantle after them would suffer the same fate, they likely passed down an art of firekeeping that didn't allow the firekeeper to get so close with the flame. Perhaps this was out of compassion for the women that would follow, for fear that they too would be blinded for seeing too much. Or maybe they did it out of love for Gwyn, as even after being blinded by their king, they continued to serve him. And while it's possible that they feared further harm would come to them should they refuse, they still continued to pass down this tradition after his death. Perhaps they didn't want to see the truth of the flame. After all, it makes all of the bloodshed utterly pointless, and in some ways means that their beloved king is actually a fraud. There's no way of knowing why exactly they might have passed down their tradition differently. but we do know that there's at least one sect of the firekeepers that continue to faithfully practice this original method. In the tower behind Firelink lies a gruesome scene. Stacks of firekeeper corpses line the tower, all wearing the same robes as our firekeeper and all missing their eyes. Their bodies represent the survival of this original sect of firekeepers, all close enough to the flame that they had to be blinded in order to not see the truth within it. And as for why they are all clearly dead, but our firekeeper can't be killed, I think this is another facet of their duty. They're bound to the fire in such a way that it uses their soul for fuel between rekindling cycles. It keeps them alive because it's using them for strength, but once it's been rekindled, it uses what's left of their soul to further fortify itself and ends up killing them. Taking a look at our own firekeeper's hands proves this point. She's covered in burns, like she's living kindling for this flame, slowly being burned alive. And the description for the firekeeper's gloves reads, "The firekeepers were robbed of light, to better serve as vessels for souls. Only those who cherished the writhing, searing darkness were given the keeper's black attire." Only the strongest of women could be chosen to continue this line of firekeepers, as they would be forced to endure a lifetime of darkness, feeling their body being eaten away at by the flames that they tend to. Knowing all of this, I don't think it's that surprising that when our firekeeper has the ability to see the truth of the flame, she chooses to forgo her duty. After a lifetime of servitude to a false cause, she sees her greatest act of liberation as pledging herself to you, allowing you to choose your own path and supporting you in it. Because whatever you choose, it doesn't really matter anyway. The fire will always be there.
Ashen One, was it all a lie?
And that concludes the lore of the Firekeeper. I would like to read an excerpt from an interview that I found that, one, I just find really weird and funny, and two, I think kind of supports this Firekeeper being very different from the other ones. So this interview with Miyazaki took place in 2016, right before the release of Dark Souls 3, and the interviewer, in my opinion, very strangely asks him, "Did you purposely make the Firekeeper cute?" To which Miyazaki responds, I'm not sure. She might be tired of waiting. Well, but this Firekeeper is a bit different than before, and she became my favorite. But there are lots of NPCs I like besides her, so I hope players also like other NPCs too. Just the fact that he acknowledges that she, as a character, is separate from the other ones in some way, and that she's his favorite, I think really points to her being the first Firekeeper to break the cycle, to kind of wake up to the madness of all of this around this arbitrary idea of some delicate flame. I also just think that this theory and this way of approaching this game is so cool. In pretty much every other video game that I can think of that I've played, you as the player, you're the main character. You're the catalyst for the events of the game that, presumably forever change the world that you're interacting with. But in Dark Souls, if you ascribe to this idea that the flame is going to exist no matter what, it's really humbling in a way. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you link the flame. It doesn't matter if you choose to let it die. It really doesn't matter what you do, because the flame that Gwyn created will never die. It's always going to be there in some way, and all it takes is one person choosing to rekindle it, and then the cycle begins anew. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well, but I hope that you guys can understand what I'm trying to get across, even if you think my theory is complete bullshit. And the final thing for me, at the time that this video goes up, I should have a Discord made for the channel. The link for that will probably be down in the description. So if you want to come and hang out and chat about Dark Souls theories and lore and just all things Dark Souls, please come join. I would love to talk to you. But that's all I've got for this episode. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, don't go hollow.